Welcome to Opera San José Talks. My name is Larry Hancock, and I'm the General Director of Opera San José. And today I have with me Peter Grunberg, the conductor, and Brad Dalton, the director of Mozart's comedy Cosi fan tutte. We will open our 34th season with Cosi fan tutte on September 9 at the California Theater for a run of 6 performances. If you are interested in attending a performance, please go to operasj.org, where you will find all the information you might need to purchase tickets. Now, both of you, Brad, Peter, I want to know a little bit about you. Now, Brad, I've known you for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And Peter, I've known you for about 10 days.
Well, we met briefly about a year ago.
We shook hands, yeah, indeed. So I'd kind of like to know a little bit I'm curious to know a little bit about your lives and where you're from. Now, Brad, I know that you're from Houston.
I was born in Houston, Texas. Right, that's right. I went to high school there, and I was interested in math and science, but I played the violin and piano, and I loved music very much. But it was when I went to college. I went to Harvard University. I was going to be a doctor or a research scientist like my father, and I got a degree in biochemistry. But while I was there, I think my education did what it was supposed to do, which was to open doors. And I directed some shows, and it was in the process of doing that a little lightning bolt struck inside that I really, really enjoyed it. The first play I ever did was Glass Menagerie by Williams.
Oh, not a bad start.
Yeah, and that really, it was, I have to say at the same time that it was a pleasure to do it, there was a slight sort of torturous aspect of it because there's so much you have to figure out and decide, and the process is, I got so involved and passionate in the process that it was sort of a sweet torture in a way, I'd say. But I grew, I just knew I needed to do more. I did Hamlet, I did Equus, and then when I graduated from college, I'd already decided that I didn't want to go into the sciences, that it was a little too black and white for me. I wanted to give this a try. I wanted to try to go into theater. And so I went to a school in New York, the National Shakespeare Conservatory, and I studied in their acting program for 2 years. It wasn't merely Shakespeare. It was really just acting in the Stella Adler tradition. We had a lot of that technique. And it was there that I really learned a lot about how you tell story and how you use the techniques of telling story on stage. So I use that in what I do all the time, what my teachers taught me. How to look at what you see, because I'm really the audience as I watch each rehearsal, and to see what is clear or isn't clear, or ways you can clarify the objectives and the conflicts of the piece, and stage it so that it seems fluid and everyone's exactly where they need to be in the exact amount of time, which is a special consideration of opera, because you have a soundtrack with timing. So there's a certain amount of time to get from point A to B and then back to C and get to this person. And I always feel like that's my job in a way, is to go from the soundtrack back to the movie. So I have the soundtrack and I have the timings and I have the feeling and the subtext, and now let's see what is the physical form that fits with that, so that the two marry and this kind of serendipitous conjunction happens, where the piece comes alive because the physical form on stage matches the musical form, hopefully, or at least to what I'm trying to do. And so I was in love with that. I then traveled around the world with a backpack for about a year and saw the Berlin Wall fall down, and happened to be in Berlin that week and saw a lot of amazing things in the world happening. Came back, decided I wanted to get into opera, got a job as an assistant director by sheer will, I would not take no for an answer, at Houston Grand Opera. 3 years later, I luckily got on the staff of the Met. I was 30, and I was kept there for an entire season, and then about 5 after that. Then went to San Francisco Opera, where I actually met Peter Grunberg here, and worked there. And then I would say it was about 15 years of apprenticing as an assistant director that I felt like I had the courage to try it on my own. And I'd learned the hard way. In fact, a lot of people, not the hard way, but by being an apprentice and watching and watching and watching. People always ask me that are theater directors, "Oh, I love opera. How can I get into opera directing?" And I just say, well, wow, there can be a direct transference, but you really have to love the music. love it. You have to search for the answers within it, and you have to go off and apprentice. I say, well, do you want to be an apprentice for 15 years? That's how I did it. Be in the room with it. In fact, that's one of the challenges in doing a new opera. I always find is you haven't actually stood in the room, or any opera you're doing, with those people at that moment with that music, and it's always different every single time. So that brings me to where I am now. And luckily, when I met Irene, she was foolish enough to give me a job, and I did Madame Butterfly here. And from there, I've just enjoyed having an association with Opera San Jose for years now.
I think you've directed more shows here than any other stage director.
Oh, maybe.
Not since we were in the California.
Yeah.
I mean, this year you're directing 3 shows at Opera San Jose?
Well, there's 2. Dutchman and Cosi. And then
Cinderella.
There's Cinderella. I don't know if that's part of the regular season, but Cinderella's...
That's not part of the regular, but
there'll be a third
directing
one.
It here.
And a short period of time, too.
Yeah, boom,
which
boom,
is
boom.
its own challenge, yeah.
Yeah.
And and actually, having met Peter before, I was thrilled to work with him on this piece. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Own the other direction.
Yeah.
And that brings me to Peter Grunberg. So you're from Westphalia, right?
Yeah, you got it. No, not even any German connections. My father was born in Hungary, and I suppose somewhere back there.
Somewhere there was a German
Jewish connection.
Like Queen Victoria.
Right.
There was a German.
Yeah. Such a good German name. In any case, though, I was born in Sydney.
Sydney, Australia.
Not Sydney, Nova Scotia.
Down under.
Yeah.
And how
on
did
the right
you...
side of the
I
world.
know that you're a piano player from heaven itself. Did you start
That's
as a
also
pianist?
a town in New South Wales, I believe.
Heaven itself. So where did you study? What did you study first? You're a conductor. You're a coach. You're many things, but you play the piano like the devil himself.
I fell into music. Next door neighbour when I was 2 or 3 was a music teacher, and she took me on her knee, and I was introduced to the keys of the piano just like little characters. This is middle C, this is the one who stands in the middle, etc., etc. And also, again, as a very young kid, I started getting interested in, Brad, mathematics. So that, when I was 9 or 10, I was reading things, calculus and algebra books, just because I was so fascinated by it.
You and Mozart.
Yeah, sure. And I went to a school where both of a very good school, especially for academically advanced kids. And the principal, the headmaster of that school, his name was Alistair McKerris. This is high school. This is, in what Australia is high school, ages 12 to 17. Alistair McKerris was, of course, liked music and advanced music in the school, and his brother was Charles McKerris, the conductor.
Yeah.
So I once drove him from San Francisco to San Jose and back. And I knew that from San Francisco to San Jose, we would have covered everything we could possibly talk to each other about.
He talks pretty fast. I mean, he used to talk pretty fast.
But he knew me from Adam's house cat. He hadn't a clue who I was. I was just the driver, right? Getting him to Opera San Jose, where he's going to give a talk, really, just a talk to the resident company. And so I knew on the way back, I better have something. And I popped into my tape player my favorite recording, which was Lorin Maazel conducting the Cleveland and the Beethoven 7th.
Yeah.
And he was preparing to record it. Mm-hmm. So driving all the way back to San Francisco, he sang the bass and I sang the treble. All the way back to the city. And then we could talk about what a miracle that symphony was. There was somebody to talk about.
I always wanted to sing the middle parts of things. I heard the first opera I ever saw was the Magic Flute when I was 5. I loved it. I got a little picture book about it with the themes and the story, and I guess it was the Carry-On recording. Vilma Lipp, I think, was the Queen of the Night. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, that would be right.
Yeah, she's very famous.
Nice translation. How's she doing? In any case, so by the time I was 11, I think there were, the boys from the school were being cast in Australian opera productions as the 3 Knaben, Genie, in the Magic Flute. So I learned all 3 parts.
So
I like the second part.
You landed yourself on
I don't think so.
stage.
My voice was way too ugly, I was told later. I learned the parts, all 3.
Well,
In any way, when I finished school, which was a little bit early to go to university, Charles suggested that, since I was a bit split between maths and music, that I try some time in an opera company. There was a small opera company, smaller than this one.
even smaller than Opera Zone, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they had 5 productions a year, I think, which was being formed in South Australia, in Adelaide, called New Opera South Australia. And the ex-chorus master of Glyndebourne was coming out to start things. So there was a strange place for me in it. Well, just assisting. I could sight read very well. I always have been. I read music like I read words.
Yeah, and then you put away the score and just play it anyway.
Yeah, sure. So I ended up playing for rehearsals of the second opera was Cosi fan tutte. It's been with me a long while.
Since you were a boy.
Yeah. And actually one of the singers went on to make a very good career as a tenore spinto. Dennis O'Neill. Do you know that name? Welsh tenor? Yeah, especially in the 80s and 90s. And, well, I did all sorts of other things. I helped just play for rehearsals for Turn of the Screw and Dr. Miracle of Bizet. Do you know that?
I've heard of it. I've never
It's a very
heard
sweet
it.
opera for 3 people, 1 actor. It's a good one.
He shared a competition win with that.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And
Is it
then
the same
also,
Miracle in Hoffman? No.
No.
Oh, no, I didn't think so.
This is the charlatan.
I didn't think
well,
so.
I suppose.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. I have no idea. Yeah.
Miracle being ironic.
Right.
So, and one of the other pieces that season was a constructed piece from Monteverdi's, some of Monteverdi's madrigals, which was a boat trip and the story was of a boat trip from Venice to Padova by a group of traveling musicians. Of whom I was the conductor. I was the director.
Aww.
I was 16 at the time. And I did things like carrying on my shoulders the lead soprano from the boat to the shore. And it was a very cute show. I remember it. But that was my first taste of the stage. Because at high school, we did lots of GNS, Gilbert and Sullivan operettas.
We are considering doing our first GNS. We've never even thought about it. And I didn't know it. Pirates of Penzance.
Yeah. Pirates is a really good show.
And everybody is saying, oh, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. So I said, okay. Yeah. So I went home and I found 3 different productions online. One was a film starring Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
And then there was one from a grand opera company in the Midwest, can't remember the name of it exactly. And then there was yet another one. So D'Oyly Carte.
D'Oyly Carte.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So I watched those, got all finished with it, and said, this is perfect crap. Why would anybody do this?
Well, you said the word perfect. So, yeah.
But I just found out that it's going to be, well, I have a problem with opera in 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
It never works for me. So I realized, oh, Larry, you're selling it way short because it's just flat on the screen beside you in your bed, right? So So San Diego Opera is going to be doing it in October. So it's going to be a road trip. A bunch of us are just going to rent
see the show.
a thing and go down there, and we will be able to see the scenery also because I don't want to build a Pirates of Penzance. And if it's available in the right price, and I decide that it's actually of interest, I do trust everybody who says it's wonderful, and I've yet to find anyone who said it was anything but wonderful.
It's a show with great characterization. The music is pleasant. Arthur Sullivan's music he kept giving digs to Italian opera because, of course, in the 80s,
Lucia
60s,
is
and 70s.
quoted all over the place, and Trovatore is quoted all over the place.
Yeah. Because Italian opera was the thing, like hero movies now.
Yeah, exactly.
Strangely enough.
There you go.
Yeah. So it was quite the thing. So that's what he kept, affectionately ribbing in
and
his
also,
music.
my understanding is, I don't know this, I've only read it in books, that both Offenbach and Gilbert and Sullivan were very topical, and that they were
you mean the
lampooning their own governments.
Absolutely.
And that's
Non-stop.
why people flocked to the theater, because they wanted to laugh at the military scandal.
Completely.
They wanted to laugh at these idiots and Oscar Wilde and all that stuff that was going on. They wanted to be able to laugh at that.
Sure.
So that's where they were going. And unfortunately, that doesn't work for contemporary American audience. It may not have worked for an audience then, because we don't know. La Belle Hélène is about the French banking system. Well, in what way? So I think that's harder for us. So we're really grasping to make it funny. And where it really struck me was in the film version, where anytime somebody had a funny line to deliver, even if it was Angela Lansbury, it didn't matter who it was, except for Linda Ronstadt. She never did this. But everybody else, they would get ready to say their funny line, make a ridiculous face, and then fall on the floor. So that the audience would have
Monty Python.
So that somebody would have something to laugh at, right?
So the finale was performed prone.
Or they would turn quickly and hit somebody in the head with a mop. Or, there was always a sight gag at the line that was supposed to be funny, because they knew it was supposed to be funny, so they better do something that's funny.
I think they mix it up with a Punch and Judy show.
So it's a whole evening of sight gags. And unfortunately for me, that doesn't work. I never think sight gags are funny unless they're really apropos. And just to be a gag simply doesn't work for me. So, but I do know that it does work for the vast majority of the public. That they love sight gags.
It brings them in.
They love sight gags. They're really ready for sight gags. So that's why I can't trust me. If people want to find out about a comedy, they should ask somebody with a sense of humor. They shouldn't ask me.
Well, what's great in Cosi fan tutte is that all the comedy is so character-based. It's based in the
absolutely
people.
Based on what's happening. There's no applique. I'm abandoning my plan here. I have come to love this opera. And I didn't used to. Brad, when I hired you the very first time, because Irene handed over hiring of stage directors to me, and she hired Brad for Madame Butterfly, and Brad did the most astonishing Butterfly I've ever seen. And then I got to hire the next bunch of directors a couple of years later, so I instantly called Brad and said, hi, I hate to ask you to do this, but I have to ask you, Brad, would you consider directing Cosi fan tutte? I'll understand if you say no.
And why did you say why did you put straight away the writer?
Because I've always hated the opera. I have always loved it on paper. I love the libretto. I love the music for the most part. Some of the arias I could do without. And by the way, we're not singing them. But the ensembles are brilliant. And I didn't really understand the character development until this production. I'm finally and that's because I spent so much time studying the Enlightenment, which I hadn't done in the past. And so I'm understanding why it's unfolding as it unfolds. But for the first time, it's not about sight gags. Every time I've been to see Cosi anywhere in the world, Vienna, London, New York, San Francisco, San Jose, California, it's always been about visual sight gags, ridiculous costumes for the Albanians, girls who are silly past understanding, guys who are buffoons beyond hope, and the girls are in love with these idiot guys, and then the guys try to seduce the women, and then the women capitulate, but they're all stupid anyway. So why would I care if they're unhappy? Okay, they're unhappy. Big deal. They're stupid. It was John Wayne who said life is hard, and if you're stupid, it's really hard. And I've always believed that.
I always thought it might be easier somehow. Maybe not.
No, because you screw up too much. And when I said that to Brad, he said, I'll never forget it. Larry, those are directorial choices. It doesn't have to be that way. And I said, well, that's the only way I've ever seen it. And he said, it does not have to be that way. And then it was the first act run through, first time with orchestra. And I was out in the hall, and what was my job? Director of production. My job is to figure out everything that's wrong up there. And we were just finishing the first act when I came to my senses. What are you doing? You're supposed to be finding out what's wrong here, and you're just in a reverie over this. It was magical for me. I was just floating in it right to the end of the act.
I'm glad.
And it changed my opinion of the opera. But now I have a different opinion that's deeper. I'm going to read some stuff. Whatever is right. That's Alexander Pope. Okay, whatever is right. And this is Denis Diderot. I shall not say with Pope that all is good. Evil exists, and it is not the effect of a ridiculous apple.
Exactly. That's great. Yeah.
And then Diderot says again, all things must be examined, debated, investigated without exception, and without regard for anyone's feelings. And Voltaire, let us reject all superstition in order to become more human.
Absolutely.
And those little quotes I found in the Gutmann biography of Mozart, which I'm still licking the ink off of the pages. It's one of the most divine books I've read about anybody. And I've read like 5 biographies in the past month. But this one just raises everything above the norm. And that's caused me to look at these people so differently. I see them as both the 2 boys and the 2 women. I find at the beginning that they are insincere. They're full of bluster. They're all behaving the way they think others should see them behave. Nothing comes from their heart. Everything is put on. The 2 girls, the same way. We get out of the academy and get rid of the swords, get into the 2 girls with their loving duet. It's so wonderful. That's phony. They're acting for each other and their sisters. So way down in their heart, they have not found who they are. But during the course of everything that happens here, they become more and more themselves until you get into the second act. And these people are looking into their hearts to see how they really do feel. And it all gets exposed. And by the time you're at the end of the opera, the women especially, they have discovered who they are and are behaving as mature people. And they treat each other with fairness and understanding and a whole different concept of who they are. Like even little Dorabella, she starts making decisions for herself. You know, she's running around after Fiordiligi like the Cocker Spaniel at the beginning. Anything her sister does, she does the same thing, right? But by the time we get to Guglielmo and Dorabella sitting on the blanket, she's making some decisions, important decisions. And she's not looking over her shoulder to see who's watching.
Very wily, cunning ways also.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a whole new feeling for this opera, and it's built in. Brad, you didn't apply this to the show.
No, not at all.
This comes from
this is Mozart.
Yeah, and it's the music underneath that makes it so visceral.
And I think we can thank our lucky stars that it's not a Da Ponte Salieri opera, as it was originally going to be, and Salieri gave up.
Yeah.
He said, no, this is not my thing.
He wouldn't have the depth of character. He wouldn't have the depth of understanding.
He doesn't go for the libretto, although he saw the skill in it. It wasn't his thing.
Well, but the whole thing of the middle class coming to a place. You know, the 7 Years' War, evidently, from what I recently discovered, there was the War of the Spanish Succession, the War of the Austrian Succession, the 7 Years' War. These things depleted the coffers of the rulers of that part of Europe. France was bankrupt. Austria was in a mess. The Prussians were completely in a mess. The British nobody had any money. Who had money were the arms dealers.
Really?
The people who were supplying the military, they were getting very rich. Pompadour's family. She comes from a family of arms dealers and food and blankets and all those kinds of things for the army. And so her uncles and her parents got very rich off of the war, which got her into the presence of Voltaire, which then springs her into Versailles. So all these things are because the middle class now has the money. And also the great ideas are coming out of the middle class. Diderot was not of the upper class. And neither was Isaac Newton. I mean, all these people who are making the discoveries, they're of the middle class.
Yeah.
And they're university professors, right? And we have all these salons in Paris who now start to be filled with the great thinkers of the age. And the big boys, the dukes and the counts and the marquises, are all attending events inside the homes of the bourgeois. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire loved to go to the homes of middle-class, wealthy, untitled people, not aristocrats. So this whole elevation of middle-class people to something of regard, people we can learn from, where we can find a truth, and by the way, people who have money, suddenly become of interest. And so these 4 young people, these are not royalty. They're not gods. These are not heroes out of antiquity. They're just people dealing with ordinary people things. A whole new thing compared to what Salieri was writing. He's still writing about Juno.
Yes.
Right?
Stasio Libretti.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it's a whole new world. And I hadn't seen them as human beings.
I don't watch a lot of other productions to know what people do.
Good.
Because that messes me up. I get frozen in seeing another production. I might love it and think, oh my God, why would I do it now? Or I might hate it and think, well, I don't know what I would do if I hate it, but that doesn't matter. But and the first thing I knew was that the disguises of when I had gone before, I had not been affected by the piece. In the middle of the second act, I felt a little lost about the intentions of the characters and the transformations that were happening. And I don't like to underline things too hard, but I knew that in the beginning they were actually very selfish people. They were looking at images and lockets and talking about the aspects of each other that
My
are
boyfriend's
superficial.
prettier than your boyfriend.
Yeah, and they have an idea of love that we all have when we're young. Our first love that we fall hard for. It can often be something we never forget. We fall for image-related sexuality images. You know, I always think when people fall in love with opera, it's really about being sexually attracted to each other, not profoundly with their soul attracted to each other, unless they've known each other. But that instant attraction is like that. And so I knew that the Albanians needed to be more Omar Sharif than Charles Nelson Riley. That I wanted them to be, able to seduce and be, seductive. I knew that there was a lot of silliness in the approach that they have in Act 1, but I knew by the end that each of them was only able to choose the other for the first time in a real way. It's in a 24-hour period. I mean, really, it's kind of we can't look at Cosi as absolutely realistic in the way that we look at anything on stage as realistic. It's as if you're looking at a metaphorical presentation of life. It fits into sort of a stock play characters at the time, the mischievous maid and the sort of disguises and, oh, I thought you were this person, and you run in and you change and you hide and you come out. There's sort of a stockness to it, but what Mozart did with it is unbelievably
but also the
beautiful.
unity of time and place was something actually considered necessary in respectable theatre, because there was an argument being made.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It wasn't just slice of life, it was just several features of life put together into something which was a moral story.
Statement.
A moral statement.
Yeah.
Mainly, for me, sexual desire can take us over, and it is not all of life. Mm-hmm. Which is actually there with all the modes up on the opera.
Exactly.
That's it. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Marriage of Figaro, exactly that.
The same thing. Don Giovanni,
exactly that.
That sexual attraction is actually dangerous.
I guess I come from a different personal point. Did I say that? But
sexual attracting is actually
it can hurt you. Yes,
it can
definitely.
hurt you. Yeah. And when Brad just mentioned about
it's risky.
First love,
it's risky,
and how you never forget it. And what came to my mind was me weeping because that first love crashed. And you're right. You never forget that first one. And it can hurt you hard. And a lot of people turn away. They have that first big hurt and they go, I'll never do that again. And I think that's not uncommon.
Now I take probably a different position from you both in what this opera means in terms of characters and as a didactic story. Maybe it's from my own experience also in my early relationships. Remember, we find out in the second act that it seems that Dorabella and Guglielmo are very matched in temperament. The wrong way around compared to the way the couples were, and Ferrando and Fiordiligi in the same way. This makes me think of all sorts of people besides and myself, whose my early passionate relationships were less about the other person. They were about seeing a reflection or a desired reflection of myself in the other person. And I think this is something very deep in the opera. Also, because we do not learn much we learn nearly nothing about the initial partnerships. And I still consider, I mean, it is so in your production as well, Brad, in this production. They come back together again. Of course, it's left. It's the whole situation resolved so quickly in the opera.
Precipitous.
That's vital. That's not accidental. It leaves things a bit open, like, wow, we have all of life ahead of us. Now we have to we have to think about this.
And for the first time, they've confronted themselves in a difficult situation. And they have to have a resolution about Fiordiligi in particular.
And I think one of the biggest themes in the Da Ponte operas is forgiveness and moving on. And I think forgiveness isn't necessarily forgiveness as in terms of being blind, but acceptance,
being aware
and awareness
and able to
of
forgive.
what they've discovered. So you're right. We have no idea what will happen to them after the curtain goes down and they've been very quickly married. And we know that problems must lie ahead because they haven't discovered something which settles them into an easy forever relationship. They've discovered something that is a force to be reckoned with in their futures.
And of course, it's not quite a literal story.
No.
But imagine you actually are falling in love with something close to the best friend of your boyfriend.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge. And they are friends.
Yeah.
And they're sisters and they're friends.
Right.
Good friends. Right. The two.
And sisters.
Yeah.
It's only in the first act. You are excited by the idea that they arrive in disguises and they act in a kind of a silly way at first in their and the way that they try to woo the women by pretending to poison themselves, and a doctor comes in with a big magnet, and there's all of that. But it's when you get in the second act and you realize in order to succeed in their bet, they must bed their best friend's girlfriend or love is quite extraordinary and disturbing. I mean, this time I find it, I've changed some things in the opera. And a lot of that is dealing with Peter, because Peter has also, in dialogues with Peter about the opera, has revealed a lot to me, I feel like, about the opera. And if you want to be in the room with someone who's a fan of Cosi fan tutte, be in the room with Peter Grunberg, because he will reveal details about the composition of the piece, about the way things are set, about the tempi, about the words that are the particular words that are chosen, and the themes of it that have deepened my love for the opera, deepened my love for it. Not just my intellectual understanding. And in the end, when Alfonso told each of the lovers to go back into their pairs, and embrace each other and don't argue. Embrace each other and I used to have them go very quickly to each other, but now I allow them to have that time.
It's not easy
to come together, especially for Guglielmo. I think his pride is so hurt, and he wants to poison.
Yeah, he's still holding on to
sense,
this, this bitterness up to the very end.
But that is something that you cannot have. If they easily embraced immediately and married with happy smiles, then the piece wouldn't have anything. But I mean, even the amount of time we're given for them to make up is quite short. But at least if they're right down center with nothing else on stage, and we see them, then the minutia of what they do. Because I'm a great believer that the details of what any character does matters, because that's the way I was trained. So I'm glad you don't think it's broadly comic, but I learned in my school that I went to, we learned to trust that as human beings, we detect information from the minutia of things that happen around us. You're sitting across the table from someone you've never met, and within a minute, you have a feeling about them. And that comes from the way they're sitting, the way their eyes are glancing, the way they sit. So I really tried to work on that with the singers and hold that in. And so I hope people see that at the end, is basically what I say.
I certainly see that.
Because it's a lot to owe up to. It's a lot to owe up to.
You mean the piece?
The piece, yes, the piece. I mean, being in the room every day, Peter and I just look at each other and go, and we're talking to everyone, and the singers are talking about, oh my gosh, there's so much in this piece.
And I have felt actually more than... Well, I think it's partly me, one gets older, one gets more open. I think one gets more open, I feel I have, to what's in front of you. And when you have Mozart and also Da Ponte in front of you, these just rehearsals with you, Brad, have opened new things up for me in the piece hugely. And just hearing the music in these last 2 days of reading, we've just been reading with the orchestra. We've had orchestral readings without the singers. Just the sheer...
Which, by the way, Peter... I was so startled when I came in for the first read-through. I go sit behind a screen so that nobody's paying much attention to me, behind the conductor over on the side. And
like a wizard.
I just hide over there. And I discover a whole different depth of genius in these composers by having all the artists gone. All the singers gone, no costumes, no action, just what the orchestra is doing. And with Cosi, I can sing all the parts in my head.
Right.
So I'm sitting there hearing the orchestra go through, and where Mozart chose not to have music out of the pit, or to have just these three things happening, and then where he decides it's going to be 7, now it's going to be...
It's going to be a whole
everybody's going to have to stand up. It showed me a different kind of thoughtfulness in Mozart that I don't experience when I'm in the hall and everything is going on at once, because I'm entirely caught up in what the singers are doing.
Opera's overwhelming. I mean, take a colleague of yours, Peter Sellers Productions. You cannot... I think there's too much going on. I mean, he just throws everything he can at it, and it's all interesting. But I'm not sure whether it's like eating a bowl of fabulous ice cream, caviar, and orange juice at the same time. I mean, they don't necessarily go against each other so much, but just my personal opinion.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on.
Yeah. Yep. Whereas, Brad, I think you enjoy the complementary, with an A, nature of words, action, and music, and that they must function in symbiosis.
It all serves the music. If you're not, it does. I really do. I think that's why. Everything is about... I mean, you can't ask a singer to do something that they can't do. I can't sit on the ground during this because I can't make the vocal sounds I need. Well, we don't need you to sit on the ground. Or you just have to work together in that way. And in this piece, it's particularly challenging because you're always questioning yourselves, because you always see you're down to level A and B, and you just think, oh, there's C and D also that Mozart has in here with this vibrato, and I'm trying to get that too, but it's so hard. Yeah. It's so hard to get it all because
there is so much.
There's so much.
This is
not like Ronzi
absolutely extraordinary, especially in this piece. It's the last of the three Da Ponte operas, and he takes things to a new level in also the relationship between the orchestra and the singers, and the number of colours that he gets out of the orchestra, and the different combinations of the singers he uses. And that takes us to emotional territory which has rarely been explored before or since. And then there is the issue of why is this music so continually ridiculous, absurdly beautiful. Absurdly. And he knew this. He knew this. I'm sure he knew this.
Well, a master. He would make it be whatever he wanted it to be.
But he could compose sometimes more academic music.
Certainly. Or
for characterization, say, for humor. But even in Fior di Ligi's first aria, we as the audience, I find it, I hope, there's always a combination of, we can laugh at Fior di Ligi as being a slightly...
Come scoglio, right, yeah. Exactly.
Come scoglio, yeah. My love is like a rock. It'll won't move in her attitude.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the music is sincere. She's really feeling that's where this girl is.
Absolutely.
At least that's... And Mozart's ability to work on a dramatic... to have several, as we call them, tones going at once is extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. And I think the point of the beauty of the opera, of the music, is to sear, S-E-A-R, these feeling, the understanding into the consciousness and unconsciousness of the listener and viewer. In the same way that in opera in general, we pick beautiful voices usually to sing, except for characters' parts. Why? Because beauty affects us deeply and barrels into our brain. In the same way, in movies, they pick pretty actors and actresses for the main roles.
Because I will believe Jake Gyllenhaal, I don't care what he says to me.
He would make a great Guillermo.
When I was a kid in undergrad school, we used to cast operas with film stars.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I would cast him. Is it true?
So is Don Alfonso in McKellen or?
Wouldn't mind. We have a fabulous Don Alfonso.
We do indeed.
It's the best.
What we have is an amazing cast.
Yeah, they're wonderful. They're really
These
wonderful.
voices. Yeah. I've had a couple of talks with singers already, so this is my first time leaving singers behind, but I just find those voices so perfectly matched.
Yes, it's a great ensemble. Also in acting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I was joking about Ian McKellen, but our Alfonso is so fabulous. I mean, to single someone out, I could single each of them out and talk about them, but Malcolm is just stellar, I think. Really wonderful. And if you don't have an Alfonso, you don't have a piece. Because I make him the stage manager of the evening, because he is in charge of it all. He's setting it all up
for everything.
So all he does is clap, and the scenes change, and he makes sure we're ready for the next setup and moves on. So
Alfonso is bankrolling the whole thing. He had to buy the Albanian costumes.
He must be a wealthy man.
Hire the chorus.
Yes, hire the chorus.
And usually the first scene is done in a bar, and a lot of times he hires the people that are working in the bar to be various characters that you recognize as those people throughout the piece, I believe. But he's definitely got money.
And
well, he's the member of nobility.
Oh, absolutely.
The whole piece is so symmetrically constructed.
Absolutely.
Which, you have these four young people in the middle, and then in a social sense, you have Don Alfonso above and Espina below.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and they pair off so perfectly.
Yes, and yes, of course. Those four are like a square with all possible connections.
Exactly.
A square with the two diagonals
along
connected.
the diagonals and exactly.
Therefore, the whole thing makes an octahedron, Mr. Mathematician, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely.
Yes, it really does.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And I just had to ask somebody in the audience the other day. So, what was it that Isaac Newton invented? Was it what is calculus? Oh, okay, great.
Don't forget Mr. Leibniz.
Yeah,
he also did. Yes, true. And what's his name? René Descartes, who gave us analytical geometry. Yeah.
What are we doing talking about mathematics?
Well, because it's the age of reason.
Yeah. I have my passion for mathematics. I've been a little bit outpaced. I mean, I haven't kept. You can't keep up. But the little I know, I have basically the equivalence of like a second or third year, just before probably you're getting a bachelor's degree, understanding of mathematics. And for me, this maybe is unfathomable to people who haven't understood mathematics at a certain level. It's very similar to music. It's for me.
I find
the emotional aspect. The emotional aspect, would you believe? Okay, there aren't people involved.
Right.
But there's a certain way the ideas weave together at various layers, superficial and then unbelievably deep. You see, there's things are related which are so far apart you never imagined it, and that's been and discoveries about that have been coming about only the last 100 years or so in mathematics. Totally digressing here. If anyone out there knows what category theory is, it's unbelievable. Anyway, back to music.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing. Yeah. It's, by the way, the relationship between mathematics and music is nothing to do with the fact that that music is, well, seems to be mathematical, like there are 12 notes in the octave, and for me it's like nothing to do with that
series.
No, it's not that either. No, that's the surface. The real truth is way underneath.
Well, there's something strange in music, and that's for certain. There's something strange in music because there are a few things that stop time for me, but in my life, the first trio in Cosi has stopped time for me. There was a performance right here in San Jose where a young man, came out and sang Aura Amorosa. And when it was over, I had to leave the theater. I just couldn't watch the rest of it. It was just so sublime. And in Silent Night, there's a duet, Komm Frühling, in which the tenor and the soprano just sing a little duet for the Crown Prince. And the way it starts is they're singing a little mezzo forte. They're just coming right into saying, it sounds like a Brahms Liebeslieder waltz. They just start singing, and he chokes up and can't go on. And she turns around and says, "Are you all right?" "Oh, hell no, you're not all right at all." Because he's come straight from the trench, right? And so she gets him settled down, and then they start over. Only this time, it's pianissimo. And imbued with meaning. And it stops time. You can't walk away from it. It stops time. Occasionally, a great painting will do that for me. That I'll stand and look at a painting and go, and you're just arrested. You just can't move. You can't look away, and you can't move.
I notice these things happen when you're there live.
It's only there live.
I think also, for me, a key moment in later opera where this happens extraordinarily is it's not just time stops. It goes through a wormhole, and has a whole different dimension. Is the second act of Tristan und Isolde. That is beyond belief, this music for me. I actually find Tristan way above all the Wagner. Same composer. But for me, in spite of its incredible length and lack of story, it's so weird.
I just saw it at Houston Grand Opera about 4 years ago. Nina Stemma was in it with Ben Heppner, and the production was very simple, but I had to see it again. I saw it twice, and I brought friends the second time, and we got seats really close that were really expensive because I said no money isn't, you can't. I don't care how much it is, and watched it the second time again, and just being close to it was an experience that was unbelievably spiritual. We have these moments where not only time changes, but I feel the space around me change. I can't explain it. It happened. We all know that. And when I was younger and I'd go to symphony concerts, there would be moments in Mahler that I'd heard for the first time and I was hearing it live where I actually had that kind of thing where I felt I was floating above my seat. I would start to panic, and I felt my body lifting up, and I would just submit to it. And somehow it seemed to go up, but then it never moved at the same time. And those are the things that we hope for. And those moments can happen in a tiny theater with 2 wonderful actors with 10 seats. They can do something, and I've had it happen then with acting and text, or it can happen in a gigantic theater with a huge orchestra and just the right moment, but it's unpredictable, and it's
and in a way you can't aim for it. You can't aim for it at all. You just must trust the details.
Yeah.
Work on the details, know the piece backwards, forwards, upside down, inside out, and trust talent or whatever.
Back in the days when I used to play the piano, when I was much younger than I am now and didn't have arthritis, it was mostly Chopin and Beethoven that I would find myself unaware of myself. And it was just that sound.
Yeah.
And with Beethoven in particular, I would get this feeling that I'm depressing the keys, the same keys in the same order that Beethoven did, right? Just be overwhelmed with the idea that I'm playing Beethoven. This is Beethoven. He did this. I was 18.
Right, okay, right.
But it was just unnerving. You're playing it, and it's unnerving. And it's playing. You're not playing. It's playing.
I do understand that. And I never thought of that. But the one time I had probably what is a similar experience is very close to the start of my operatic career, which I fell into totally by accident, by the way, mainly because of my sight reading. I was working in Geneva, where I worked for about 8 years, the chief repetitor, when I was in my 20s, and it was a very well-run theatre indeed, and we had really interesting productions and very good conductors. I worked with Christian Thielemann when he was a rather objectionable young man several times. We got on very well. We're about the same age. I think he just respects talent and just is very nasty to anybody who doesn't have it. In any case, so Tatiana Troyanos sang there many, many times. She was one of my favorite artists of the 20th century. I've had dinner with her
a few times. She was close to Irene.
All right, of course. And Hugo Gale, who is the director of the theatre, the intendant of the theatre, one day came to us during a production of, what was it? Don Carlo, that's right. Where also, during the off days, I had the great pleasure of, coaching's not quite the word, I was a little bit young, running through the part of Dorabella again with Tatiana.
Oh.
And while we were doing this one day, Hugues came into the rehearsal room and said, I have an interesting little proposal for the two of you. I have a friend who just bought the manuscript of a Mozart song, and he would love you to do a private recording of it for him.
Not a bad choice.
We did that with a fee, which I have to say was equivalent to a first-rank engagement of a complete duet recital.
Wow.
But I decided, of course, it was possible. I read from the Mozart autograph in the recording, and that was it was maybe a similar feeling to what you said.
Except I was working from Calmus or something. So.
No, but just. It was very clear that was Mozart's actual gestures, and I could envisage the time when he actually wrote that down. It's a very short song. It's only about a minute 10. It's as Louisa burnt the letters that her lover had sent her. very concise. Composed, in fact, I think a couple of months before Cosi fan tutte. And very much in the vein of one of the arias which we had to cut this time, Tradito Schernito, very close to that, also in C minor. Oh, in Cosi fan tutte, the ideas of these are levels that it's hard to get across to an uneducated, uneducated,
and
inexperienced audience. The use of keys by Mozart, which was very important in all the 18th century, and Mozart took to an incredible level of sophistication. But the only way to understand this is, as you say, by experience and also by learned and helpful guidance. Guidance used to be a musical education. People have less musical education now. They do.
I don't even address music in my lectures. I never even talk about it. I talk about character and I talk about plot. And I may say this aria is particularly beautiful or this quartet is particularly beautiful, and when that starts you'll know it because it will stand out in the evening for you. But I never talk about form, I never talk about key relationships, nothing like that.
Interesting, because I'm perhaps courageous or more foolhardy enough when I give lectures, which I actually usually give 7 or 8 series of lectures about music, about the program at the San Francisco Symphony each year.
Now, symphony is very different.
Okay, I go straight into the engine room. I go straight in the engine room, and then I jump out to the view of the ship going by as well, and the gorgeous beach. But I keep going back and forth from the way it's made to the effect it has.
But you also are at a piano, I take it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm standing in a room.
Right. No, every now and then they say, piano isn't available. I said, can I just about give up, please? I find a few more excerpts and I have to go. Yeah, piano is much easier.
I recently went to a recital. I was lucky to go to one by Anders Schiff. And he started the recital with, I kid you not, 30 minutes. He went through everything he was about to play, and he explained it musically to the audience. It was really a bit long, I have to say, but it was fascinating.
Really good for piano players in the room.
And you heard it differently afterwards. Yeah. He was combining Bach with Bartok, going back to Bach, Bartok, Bach. It was you know, and it was absolutely fabulous to hear him talk about it from an emotional level too. It wasn't just theory about, you know, well, of course, then to modulate you have to use this common tone, you know, nothing like. It was very much about the workings of the piece. What you're hearing, not necessarily what it represents all the time, but it was just fabulous. It was great.
I actually think
it was amazing.
I was talking to you about Charles Rosen the other day, another wonderful pianist and lecturer. I think died about 10 years ago, who did the same thing. Had been doing that since the 60s, and lots of recordings of him. You used to have a listen to that. They're very good indeed.
That was great.
And he also writes wonderfully on, especially the period of Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven and Schubert. What was I going to say? Another thing about András Schiff is that he comes from the Hungarian school of music education, which I think I have had the great fortune to have been raised in that to some extent. I had friends of my father. My father was Hungarian. There was a whole Hungarian mafia in Sydney at that time, and many of them were musicians. The cantor at the synagogue we went to was Hungarian. He played piano duets with me, and of course, you absorb just by osmosis music by playing piano duets. Mozart played piano duets non-stop. I mean, he wrote his piano duet sonatas and his piano sonata. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and for students of his, and. My violin teacher was Hungarian. Well, he gave up, and we sort of gave up together. He said, you just don't have the Sitzfleisch for this, do you? I said, no.
Sitzfleisch being a fanny. You cannot sit on your bottom for long enough to get any results, can you? You always get distracted and go to something else. Yeah. Anyway, too bad. He was a wonderful teacher. And when I continued my education in London from, about age 17, 18, my piano teacher was a fine piano teacher who, in fact, taught Schiff and Kocsis, Zoltán Kocsis. Wow. He was their teacher.
And he could also see that I even didn't have the Sitzfleisch to be a solo pianist either. And strangely enough, he had a neighbor, a Hungarian friend, who was a singing teacher, a renowned singing teacher. And she had just broken her wrist. She used to accompany her own singing lessons.
So you had to accompany?
Yes, because she was never happy with anyone. She had tried a few people, and she was never happy with anyone who played. And Balint suggested that I play for her lessons, and we got on very well. Her name was Vera Roja, and the second lesson I played was for Kirite Kanawa.
Oh my gosh.
So I thought, this is lovely. This is what voices should sound like.
Yeah, not a bad voice.
But in a way, it's the same thing. You as a young piano student, you learn Mozart sonatas. And you think to yourself, oh, that's very nice. That's what good music is. You don't realize quite how good it is until you 20 or 30 years later.
And you start hearing other people. Funny
But
story.
it's not only that. It's just that music deepens and the other one just stays nice. Or not so nice.
Funny story about Takanawa. Irene was sitting with Price, and Takanawa was on stage singing, and the next opera we're doing, Rondine, right? And she was singing the Canzone di Doretta, right? And she gets to the repeat where it goes now up to the C. And she introduced the pianissimo C. And Price leaned over to Irene and said, "Damn, now we're all going to have to do it."
That's awesome. That's great. Oh, my God.
It's a little bit like that with the high B flat at the end of Celeste Aida, except people can't. Because Verdi wrote that for the same tenor as sings in Gemisco in the Requiem, and the Requiem really demands high piano singing.
Yes, it does.
And
that's what Mozart did in this stupid opera.
That's true.
Jeez, what he asked of Ferrando. Well, everybody's. I'm coming to think
difficult opera
that there is
to
simply
sing.
nothing in anybody's part that's actually easy to do.
Oh my God, no.
I agree.
Just not. I don't care.
Astonishing.
I don't care if you're playing,
ridiculous.
as you said, second violin. One of the most difficult second violin parts in the whole repertoire.
Yep.
And it's
exposed
just
and
for everybody.
You know, it's so amazing is we will get ready for a run through, and I'll look over, and the 6 of them will be sitting there, and I'll say, "Well, is everyone here?" And then I realize that these 6 people are carrying the stage for 3 solid hours of this difficult music. And they seem, when they sit together, it's unfathomable that the 6 of them sitting there are doing this. It's incredible what each of them has to take on. There's no hiding. There's no small accompanying role. There's nothing. It's
the same with the orchestra.
It's just out there and fabulous.
Yeah, Mozart doesn't use extra anything.
No.
He only uses exactly what you need, nothing more. And that means that absolutely everybody is pulling their weight all night.
Oh, my God, yes.
Some composers discover this relatively late in their career, like, that's not that late, Stravinsky. After his first period, which still remains his most popular works, when he does cut everything back to the soldier's tale. Ever since then, not more, nothing extra. Nothing extra.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is to hear composers talk about orchestration, and they're constantly saying, well, of course, you go back to Mozart, and that's where you learn, this is how it's done, guys. And it's Mozart. He's got 35, 40 players. And you're looking at Strauss with 107, 110. But still, they're looking back at Mozart to see, how is this actually done? Like this.
I was marveling just yesterday at without orchestra. Well, I'd done the orchestral reading in the morning of what I keep calling the serenade. In fact, it is a serenade. The duet with chorus when in the second act, when the Albanians come in costume with a whole.
Yes. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's ridiculously beautiful. But on top of it, the writing for the accompanying instruments. We have never heard the winds playing alone in this opera. And we hear it for the first time in this number. It's for 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, and 2 horns. Most of the piece, at least. Which interweave in these fabulously, I would say, erotic ways. completely sensual ways. And then when the chorus comes in to just sing the last lines the boys have sung, just to put a beautiful golden ribbon on the whole thing, the flute comes in. The two flutes come in on the top. It's like an angelic effect. It's just I mean, the word is, how can someone
with
conceive
such
this
small means?
Yes, that's right. Just throwing a couple of flutes at a double octave pitch, playing a legato line where the other people are just phrasing with a bit more articulation.
There's that great moment in Amadeus where Salieri is listening to, I can't remember the name of the piece.
The squeeze box,
right,
as he calls it.
And he's saying, there's simply just a breathing at the beginning, nothing much, and then an oboe comes in and it's taken over. And the way he describes it is exactly what you're saying. The miracle of that just getting it exactly right. It's
the same kind of thing in undergrad school form and analysis. We were to analyze the Beethoven 7th Symphony second movement. And you sit down, you open up your little Dover score, right? And you have the little earphones on, you bum, 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 and you see it going along. And then, okay, well, now that pops up to the next level, and now you're playing something else. Okay, so these are two intense. Pops up another little, that pops up to that one, and this new one comes in, and then it pops up to another, and there's four of them, and then you get to the badia, and I just stood up out of my seat. It was like, my God, how can he do this? It's so tight. It's so glorious. And
again, with
we
Mozart,
have the best jobs in the world.
But
Guys,
Mozart,
do you know that?
There's yet one more thing with Mozart, which is mysterious. Quite a few of his phrases are stock phrases, so to speak. The language of a lot of the 18th century is on purpose restricted.
Right.
There are phrases you could easily find in any decent 18th century composer, but it's the way he puts those elements together and the context and the tone he gives them, which even in that, the little clarinet solo in the middle of the introduction, dee da dee dum da 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 dum, dee, that's lovely, da dee, but it's more than lovely in the context.
What I'm sorry about is that I don't really understand Empfindsamkeit, the Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach kind of stuff, and truly the Galant style.
Yes.
And then there are other styles, the Italian style, and then there are others that Mozart pulls from all of them, and his evidently great genius of the time was how to do what Handel had developed. What Haydn had developed in using inner voices that had been lost for a time while they're doing the Stil Galant tune on top and something underneath it. But Haydn says, no,
as a reaction against the contrapuntal music, which
we're going to return with some not true contrapuntal, but we're going to give ourselves the forward motion.
We're going to give the music some depth
and create the forward motion through the inner voices and those kinds of things. I need to sit down and listen to that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Isolated, so that I understand what Mozart has pulled together from a crazy quilt and made it into this fabulous unified thing that should have astonished everybody at the time, but I think befuddled everybody at the time.
But again, Mozart could, this is sort of a tautology, he could have only existed in his time, in that time, because, of course, he was an unbelievable genius. But those influences, those actual influences, and that particular way of writing musical language was coming to pass then in the 1770s, 1780s, 1790s.
And his great good fortune of this horrific
childhood
European tour.
Yes, exactly, his childhood.
Where he's going to every capital and being exposed to the best of composers, because he was such a little miracle. He was being exposed to the best composers. I mean, my goodness. Bach in London holds him on his knees, and they both play together. Mozart in the middle.
With Christian, I didn't know that. With Christian Bach.
Yeah, with Christian Bach, literally, because Christian Bach was arranging the performances for the royal family.
I don't
So
know.
when Mozart came to Buckingham House, Buckingham Palace didn't exist, right? Comes to Buckingham House. It is Bach who organized the concerts.
And that's partially why Mozart did those arrangements of the Bach keyboard of Christian Bach's keyboard concertos as his early piano, and we call them his early piano concertos, although they're Bach's. Well,
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. So he's amalgamating. He's taking in and understanding at 8 years of age.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What Christoph is doing, and then he goes and Carl Philipp Emanuel. He obviously goes straight over to Prussia now, actually to the lowlands, and is exposed to all that music.
I guess I should read my Gutmann, shouldn't I? Larry, you have an encyclopedic knowledge, but I guess this is in Gutmann for sure, isn't it? In the book you've been
most
reading,
of it, yes, absolutely. But I do
read.
read. When I have to stand up in front of a public and talk, and I have to give all these lectures, I'm terrified of who's out there. So I read as much as I can before I go there. But the Gutmann, it's just fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
It's 800 pages. But so what? So is Middlemarch.
Yeah.
I read that. have we beat this horse to death? We could talk for 2 more hours. I think all we need is some bourbon.
But here we are, like the
really
opera, finishing in a riso, in a laugh, as the opera in fact does.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen,
Thank you.
I'm indebted to you both for being at Opera San Jose and bringing one of the
being
great
here.
masterpieces to the stage.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your time
Great
today.
pleasure. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks
so
Larry.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.